Hello my dear dreamers. Welcome back to Emerald Dreams, our sanctuary where the ancient whispers of Ireland drift like morning mist through forgotten glens, and where the stories of old come alive once more. Tonight, I invite you to settle into your most comfortable space, perhaps wrapped in a soft blanket with a warm drink close at hand, as we embark upon a voyage to one of the most enchanting realms in all of Irish mythology. This is a place where silver branches heavy with golden fruit chime with otherworldly music, where the waves of an endless sea carry the scent of apple blossoms upon their crests, and where time itself bends and flows like honey from a sacred tree. We are journeying tonight to Emain Ablach, the Isle of Apples. This mystical island, spoken of in hushed tones by ancient bards and druids alike, stands as one of the most evocative images in Celtic tradition. It is a paradise beyond the western waves, a realm where the gods themselves make their home, and where mortals who are fortunate enough, or perhaps foolish enough, to find its shores discover that the ordinary rules of existence no longer apply. Here, on this blessed isle, there is no sickness to wither the body, no sorrow to burden the heart, no death to separate loved ones. The apple trees that give the island its very name bear fruit throughout every season, their branches never bare, their bounty never exhausted. But Emain Ablach is more than simply a paradise of plenty. It is a place woven deeply into the fabric of Irish mythological consciousness, appearing in some of the most profound and beautiful tales of the ancient world. It is the dwelling place of Manannan mac Lugh, that magnificent sea god whose dominion stretches across the very waves themselves. It is the realm where the great god Lugh, master of all skills, was raised and trained in the ways of the divine. And it is a place that countless mortal heroes have sought, drawn by the promises of beautiful women bearing silver branches, or by visions of a land where joy knows no ending. Throughout our time together this evening, we shall explore every facet of this wondrous isle. We shall delve into the meaning of its name, and why the apple holds such sacred significance in Celtic tradition. We shall meet the god who reigns over these mystical shores and learn of his incredible powers and possessions. We shall follow brave heroes as they voyage across perilous seas, guided by nothing more than the faint music of apple branches and the hope of finding a better world. And we shall trace the threads that connect this ancient Irish paradise to other legendary realms, including the famous Avalon of Arthurian legend. So, my dear friends, let your breathing slow and your thoughts quieten. Allow the cares of the modern world to slip away like autumn leaves carried upon a gentle stream. For we are about to step through the veil between worlds, to cross the silver sea, and to walk among the eternal apple groves of Emain Ablach. Let us begin our journey into the heart of this Celtic paradise, where every moment stretches into eternity and every apple holds the promise of immortal wisdom. The sacred name, understanding Emain Ablach. Before we can truly appreciate the wonder of this mythical isle, we must first understand what its name tells us, for in Celtic tradition, names carry profound power and meaning. The term Emain Ablach, sometimes rendered as Emain Ablach in Middle Irish, translates most directly as Evan of the Apples or the apple-bearing place. The word Evan itself presents something of a linguistic mystery that scholars have long debated. Some connect it to the Old Irish word main, meaning goods, wealth, or hoarded treasure, which eventually came to signify cultivated land or a prosperous place. In this interpretation, Emain Ablach would mean the prosperous place of apples, or the wealthy land of fruit trees. This makes a certain poetic sense, for what greater wealth could there be than an island where the trees never cease their bearing, where abundance flows without effort, and where the very fruit itself carries magical properties. Others draw parallels between Evan and the famous Ulster location Evan Mocha, seat of the ancient kings of that province, recorded in Ptolemy's 2nd century geography as Oisin. Celtic scholar Heinrich Wagner traced this name to Proto-Indo-European roots meaning, what is moving by itself rapidly, or the stream, suggesting a connection to flowing water or perhaps the endless cycle of life itself. In this reading, Emain Ablach might be understood as the ever-flowing apple place, or the living Isle of Apples, emphasizing the eternal, dynamic nature of this paradise where nothing stagnates and life perpetually renews itself. The second part of the name, Ablach, presents less mystery but perhaps even greater significance. It derives from the Old Irish word abal, meaning apple or apple tree, with the suffix indicating abundance or possession. Thus, Ablach means having apple trees or rich in apples. This may seem a simple enough description until we begin to understand just how important the apple was in Celtic spiritual life. In the ancient Celtic world, the apple tree held a position of profound reverence. It was considered among the noblest of all trees, celebrated in the Welsh poem Cad Godw, or the Battle of the Trees, as the tree that symbolized poetic immortality. The Druids, those learned priestly figures who served as the spiritual guides of Celtic society, fashioned their sacred wands from either yew or apple wood. Yew represented death and transformation, while apple represented life eternal and the gateway to the other world. To carry an apple wood wand was to carry a key that could unlock the doors between this world and the realm of the divine. The apple fruit itself was laden with symbolic meaning. When cut horizontally through its center, the apple reveals a 5-point star formed by its seed chambers, a symbol that represented wholeness, protection, and the sacred geometry of the natural world. This hidden star was seen as proof that the apple contained within itself the secrets of the universe, the mysteries that the Druids spent their lives attempting to understand. Furthermore, the apple was intrinsically connected to concepts of immortality and sustenance beyond ordinary physical needs. In the Irish tale Airt Connla, or The Adventure of Connla, the hero is given an apple by a fairy woman that sustains him for an entire month without diminishing. No matter how much he eats from it, the apple remains whole, a perfect metaphor for the inexhaustible abundance of the other world. This magical fruit makes him long for the beautiful country from which it came, suggesting that once one has tasted of the otherworld's fruits, one can never be entirely satisfied with the mortal realm again. The apple also appears as a means of passage between worlds. In numerous tales, heroes are presented with silver or golden branches bearing apples that, when shaken, produce music so sweet that it can lull listeners into trance states where the boundaries between worlds dissolve. These branches served as both invitation and key, calling mortals to the other world while simultaneously providing the means to journey there safely. So when we speak the name Emain Ablach, we are invoking far more than simply a geographical location. We are calling forth an entire worldview in which fruit-bearing trees represent the source of all wisdom, where apples are the food of gods and the promise of eternal life, and where abundance flows endlessly from the divine realm to those fortunate enough to find their way there. The Isle of Apples is not merely a place where apple trees happen to grow. It is a realm whose very essence is intertwined with everything the apple represents: immortality, wisdom, poetic inspiration, and the eternal renewal of life. Understanding this, we can begin to appreciate why Emain Ablach occupied such an important place in the Celtic imagination. It was not simply a pleasant destination for seafaring heroes seeking adventure. It was nothing less than a manifestation of the sacred, a place where the divine principle of endless abundance and eternal youth took physical form in orchards that stretched to the horizon, their branches forever heavy with golden fruit. Manannan mac Lugh, guardian of the Apple Isle. No discussion of Emain Ablach can proceed far without introducing the magnificent figure who reigns over this mystical realm. Manannan mac Lugh, whose name means Manannan, son of the sea, stands as one of the most important and beloved deities in all of Irish mythology. He is a god of many aspects and countless names, a shapeshifter and trickster, a guardian of boundaries and a keeper of secrets. And above all, he is the Lord of Emain Ablach, the protector of this apple-blessed paradise. Manannan belongs to the Tuatha De Danann, that race of godlike beings who possessed supernatural powers and profound wisdom. Yet even among these divine figures, Manannan holds a special place. When the Milesians, the ancestors of the modern Irish people, conquered Ireland and forced the Tuatha De Danann to retreat from the surface world, it was Manannan who took on the role of their protector and guide. He divided the underground dwelling places known as Side among the surviving gods, allotting to each their own fairy mound. And he cloaked their locations in the Feth Fiada, a magical mist of invisibility that hid the entrances to the otherworld from mortal eyes. But Manannan did not retreat underground with the others. Instead, he maintained his dominion over the sea and the mystical islands that lay beyond the western horizon. His home, Emain Ablach, became a refuge not only for himself but for all who sought the peace and abundance that the island offered. From his palace in the city of Cruithing Na, Manannan ruled over a realm where the concerns of the mortal world held no sway. The sea god possessed an array of magical items that appear throughout Irish mythology, each one remarkable in its power. His boat, Squaba Twin, meaning wave sweeper, could navigate itself across the ocean, needing no crew to guide it. This vessel could travel not only upon the waters but also beneath them, carrying its passengers to submarine realms or across vast distances in the blink of an eye. In some tales, this boat appears as a crystal vessel, transparent as glass, reflecting the magical nature of the journey it enables. Manannan's horse, Aonbar, whose name means unique-maned or flowing-maned, could gallop across the surface of the ocean as easily as over solid ground. This magnificent steed appears white as sea foam in most descriptions, its hooves barely touching the wave crests as it carries its rider over impossible distances. When heroes journey to Emain Ablach or other otherworld destinations, they often do so upon such magical horses, the boundary between sea and land becoming meaningless in the presence of these divine creatures. Among his most famous possessions was the sword Fragarak, known as the Answerer. This blade possessed several remarkable properties. When pointed at someone's throat, it compelled them to speak only truth, making lies impossible. In battle, no armor could withstand its edge, and wounds inflicted by Fragarak were invariably fatal. Manannan would later give this weapon to the god Lugh, demonstrating the generosity that characterized his role as foster father to many divine figures. The sea god also owned a magical cloak that, when shaken between two people, could cause them to forget each other entirely. He used this power when his wife Fand, after an affair with the hero Cúl Chulainn, chose to return to him. Manannan shook his cloak between the two lovers so that neither would remember the other, ending their suffering through the mercy of forgetfulness. Perhaps most importantly for our understanding of Emain Ablach, Manannan ensured the welfare of the Tuatha De Danann through several means. He held the Feast of Goibniu, a divine banquet that conferred eternal youth upon all who partook of it. And he provided Manannan's swine, magical pigs that could be killed and eaten one day, only to revive the next, providing an inexhaustible supply of food. These elements of his character reveal Manannan as a deity of abundance and regeneration, perfectly suited to rule over an island where nothing ever dies and plenty never ceases. The sea god's connection to Emain Ablach runs deeper than mere residence. In many ways, the island embodies his essential nature. Just as the sea is ever-changing yet eternal, Emain Ablach exists in a state of perpetual abundance without decay. Just as Manannan moves between worlds with ease, his island serves as a threshold realm, accessible to mortals yet fundamentally divine. And just as the god possesses the power to bestow forgetfulness or truth, to grant weapons or withdraw them, so too does his island offer gifts to visitors while exacting its own subtle prices. In the medieval Irish poem Béal Suthain Sith Imna, meaning the steadfast vision of Emain's Pharamond, we learn that it was in Emain Ablach that Manannan raised the god Lugh Lamfada. This detail reveals the island not only as a paradise of pleasure, but as a place of education and transformation, where divine beings were shaped and prepared for their destinies. Under Manannan's tutelage on the Apple Isle, Lugh would develop the many skills that would later earn him the epithet Master of all Arts, and allow him to defeat the terrible Fomorian threat. Manannan's rule over Emain Ablach is characterized by wisdom, generosity, and the understanding that true power lies not in domination but in guardianship. He protects his realm not through force but through the mists that hide it from unworthy eyes, through the challenging voyages that test those who seek its shores, and through the transformation that occurs in all who truly experience its wonders. He is not a jealous god hoarding his treasures, but a generous host sharing the abundance of his paradise with those brave enough to seek it. The Silver Branch, portal to paradise. Throughout the tales of Emain Ablach and the Celtic Otherworld, one symbol appears again and again with such consistency that it has become virtually synonymous with passage to the divine realm. This is the Silver Branch, sometimes called the Golden Branch, a magical talisman that serves as both invitation and key to the apple paradise beyond the western seas. The Craob Airt, as it is known in Irish, most commonly appears as a branch cut from an apple tree, crafted from silver or adorned with silver, bearing fruit shaped as apples made from gold or crystal. When this branch is shaken, the apples strike against one another, producing music of such exquisite beauty that it can heal the sick, relieve all care and sorrow, and lull mortals into deep, restorative sleep. This music bridges the gap between worlds, creating a passage through which travelers can move from the ordinary realm into the extraordinary spaces where gods dwell. The significance of this symbol cannot be overstated. In Druidic practice, the silver branch appears to have represented a badge of office, carried by those who had attained certain levels of wisdom and authority. A bard or seer bearing such a branch proclaimed their right to speak with divine inspiration, their words carrying the weight of otherworldly truth. Some scholars suggest that actual silver branches hung with bells were used in ritual contexts, their sounds helping to induce trance states in which practitioners could journey spiritually to the other world. In the literary tradition, the silver branch serves as the opening element in several major tales. Its appearance typically marks the beginning of a hero's journey from the mundane world into realms of wonder and danger. The branch does not simply appear randomly, but is presented by messengers from the other world, usually beautiful women whose very presence signals that something extraordinary is about to unfold. The power of the silver branch lies in its ability to transform perception. When its music sounds, the listener's consciousness shifts, and what seemed solid and immutable becomes fluid and dreamlike. The boundaries that separate this world from others, normally so firm and impassable, become thin and permeable. Through this transformation of awareness, the journey to Emain Ablach becomes possible. The branch does not create a physical pathway, but rather opens the traveler's mind to possibilities that exist beyond ordinary understanding. This concept carries deep psychological and spiritual truth. The Celtic understanding of the otherworld was not that it existed in some distant physical location, but rather that it interpenetrated our own world, separated from us by the limitations of our usual perception. The silver branch, with its enchanting music and otherworldly beauty, serves as a tool for breaking through those limitations, allowing the soul to perceive what was always present but hidden. When we consider that this branch comes from an apple tree, the symbolism deepens further. The apple tree, as we have discussed, represents wisdom, immortality, and the sacred. To carry a branch of the apple tree is to carry a piece of the otherworld itself, a fragment of Emain Ablach brought into the mortal realm. The music it produces is the voice of that divine realm calling to those who are ready to hear it. In the tales that follow, we shall see how this silver branch appears to various heroes, each time opening a doorway to transformation that will change them forever. For Bran mac Febail, it arrives borne by a mysterious woman who vanishes as quickly as she appeared. For Cormac mac Airt, it comes in the hands of a stranger who demands a terrible price for its possession. In each case, the branch serves as both blessing and challenge, offering the promise of paradise while requiring the hero to leave behind everything familiar. The silver branch remains one of the most beautiful and evocative symbols in Celtic mythology, representing the eternal human longing for a better world and the belief that such a world truly exists for those with the courage to seek it. Its music calls to us still, echoing down through the centuries, reminding us that somewhere beyond the horizon, beyond the mists that hide the divine from mortal eyes, the apple trees of Emain Ablach still bear their golden fruit, and the promise of paradise awaits. The Voyage of Bran mac Febail. Among all the tales that speak of Emain Ablach and the wonders of the Celtic Otherworld, perhaps none is more beautiful or more influential than Imran Bran, the Voyage of Bran son of Febail. This ancient story, which scholars date to the 8th century though it surely preserves far older traditions, stands as one of the earliest and most complete descriptions of the Apple Isle and the mysteries that await those who voyage there. The tale begins with Bran walking alone near his stronghold, lost in thought. Suddenly, he becomes aware of music drifting on the wind behind him. No matter which way he turns, the sound always seems to come from over his shoulder, sweet and haunting, impossible to locate yet impossible to ignore. The music is so beautiful, so perfectly soothing, that despite his attempts to find its source, Bran eventually succumbs to sleep right there in the open, lulled into peaceful rest by melodies that seem to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. When Bran awakens, he finds beside him a silver branch bearing white apple blossoms. The branch is unlike anything he has seen before, its craftsmanship so fine and its beauty so perfect that it seems less like something made by human hands than something grown in a realm where perfection is the natural state of all things. Bran takes the branch and carries it back to his royal house, already sensing that something momentous has occurred. That evening, as Bran sits with his household, a woman appears within the hall. She is dressed in strange, unfamiliar garments, and her bearing suggests she is no ordinary visitor. Most remarkably, no one saw her enter, and the ramparts of the stronghold were closed. She simply appeared, as if she had stepped through an invisible doorway that exists in the very air of the hall. The woman begins to sing, and her song contains 50 quatrains describing a land of such wonder that those who hear it can barely comprehend its glories. She sings of Evan, the Apple Isle, a place of delight beyond imagining. A branch of the apple tree from Evan I bring, like those one knows, twigs of white silver are on it, crystal brows with blossoms. She continues, painting word pictures of an island where sorrow has never visited, where everyone dwells in peace without strife, where the plain is as vast as the sea and colors shimmer in ways unknown to the mortal world. She speaks of horses of golden color and horses of other hues, of music that sounds constantly on the gentle plain, of joy and pleasure that never cease. The woman reveals that in this land there is no death, no decay, no falsehood or treachery. The inhabitants live in perfect harmony, their lives filled with feasting, music, and the sweet company of one another. Time moves differently there, or perhaps does not move at all, for aging has no meaning in a place where youth is eternal. Most enticingly, she describes the women of this paradise. Beautiful ever is the land I speak of, whose bloom is as the sun. If you could reach the land, your journey would not be in vain. She urges Bran to set forth across the sea, to venture to Evan where he will find wonders beyond anything he has known. Her song completed, the woman falls silent. And then, in a moment as mysterious as her arrival, the silver branch leaps from Bran's hand where he has been holding it, springing through the air to return to her grasp. She vanishes as suddenly as she appeared, taking the branch with her. Bran is left transformed by what he has heard. The woman's song has planted a longing in his heart that will not be silenced, a yearning for the paradise she described that makes all the pleasures of his own world seem pale and insufficient. The next day, he gathers 27 companions, 9 men for each of 3 boats, and they set sail across the western sea in search of the Apple Isle. Their voyage carries them into strange waters where the ordinary rules no longer apply. After they have sailed for 2 days and 2 nights, they encounter an extraordinary sight, a figure in a chariot, racing across the surface of the ocean as if it were solid ground. This is Manannan mac Lugh, Lord of Emain Ablach, riding his magical chariot over the waves. Manannan speaks to Bran, and his words reveal the truth about the nature of reality. What appears to Bran and his men as a wild, tossing sea is, to the god's eyes, a blossoming plain covered with flowers. Where they see fish leaping through water, he sees lambs and calves grazing on meadowland. The chariots that speed across this plain, the riders who race there, all are invisible to mortal perception, which sees only the rolling waves. This revelation strikes at the heart of what Emain Ablach represents. It is not simply a distant island that can be reached by sailing far enough. It is another mode of existence, another way of perceiving reality itself. The otherworld is not somewhere else in a geographical sense. It exists in the same space as the ordinary world, but is perceived differently by those who have been awakened to its presence. Manannan also prophesies the birth of a son, Mongan, who will be born of both divine and human parentage, destined to be a great king. This prophecy connects the timeless realm of Emain Ablach to the flowing time of mortal Ireland, suggesting that the two worlds are not entirely separate, but interact and influence one another. Bran and his companions sail on, passing the island of joy where laughter never ceases, but also where one of his men, sent to investigate, becomes so entranced that he can no longer communicate with his fellows and must be left behind. Finally, they reach their destination, the land of women. The chief woman of this land welcomes Bran, throwing a ball of thread that magically adheres to his palm, then pulling his boat to shore by this enchanted connection. The voyagers enter a great house where each man finds a bed prepared for him and a woman to be his companion. The food that appears on their tables never diminishes, each meal perfect and satisfying. Bran and his men live in this paradise, and it seems to them that only a year passes in this place of endless pleasure. In reality, many centuries are flowing past in Ireland, though the men have no awareness of this temporal distortion. Their days are filled with every joy they could imagine, and more. Yet eventually, one of the company, Nectan son of Bran, is seized by homesickness. He begs Bran to return to Ireland so that he might see his homeland once more. The woman who has been Bran's companion warns them of the dangers. She tells them that if they go, they must not set foot on Irish soil, for if they do, the years they have spent in the otherworld will catch up with them instantly. With heavy hearts, Bran agrees to the journey. They sail back across the sea until they come to Shrub Brain in Ireland. People gather on the shore to meet them, and Bran calls out, identifying himself as Bran's son of Febail. But the people are confused. They know no one by that name. They say, though they have heard of such a person in their ancient stories, tales passed down through countless generations. Nectan, unable to contain his longing for his homeland, ignores the warning and leaps from the boat onto Irish soil. The moment his feet touch the ground, the centuries descend upon him. He does not age gradually but crumbles instantly into a pile of ashes, as if he had been dead and buried for hundreds of years, which in mortal time he had been. Bran, witnessing this horror, understands at last the full price of his voyage. He has gained paradise but lost his connection to the mortal world forever. From the boat, he tells the gathered people all that has happened to him and his companions, the wonders they have seen and the places they have visited. He has these stories written down in Ogham script so that the knowledge will not be lost. Then, without setting foot on the land of his birth, Bran turns his boat back toward the sea. He sails away from Ireland, and from that day forward, his wanderings are not known. Perhaps he returned to the land of women, to spend eternity in that place of joy. Perhaps he found other islands, other wonders. Or perhaps he sails still, somewhere beyond the horizon, forever voyaging between worlds. The The tale of Bran mac Febail captures so much of what makes the myth of Emain Ablach so powerful and so poignant. It speaks to the human longing for a better world, a paradise free from suffering and death. Yet it also acknowledges the cost of such transcendence. To touch the otherworld is to be changed forever, to become separated from the ordinary flow of mortal life. The journey to Emain Ablach is not one that can be made and then undone. Those who taste of its apples, who hear its music, who walk its eternal plains, are marked by the experience in ways that make returning to normal life impossible. Cormac mac Airt and the Land of Promise. While Bran's voyage takes him physically across the sea to the otherworld, another famous tale demonstrates that Emain Ablach and its wonders can be reached through different means. The story of Cormac mac Airt's adventure in the Land of Promise shows us a journey that is as much spiritual as geographical, a quest that tests the hero's values and ultimately rewards his integrity with wisdom and magical gifts. Cormac mac Airt stands as perhaps the most famous of all Irish high kings, a figure who may have been a historical ruler but around whom countless legends have crystallized. He is remembered as a king of exceptional wisdom and justice, whose reign was marked by prosperity and peace. His court at Tara was renowned throughout the land, and his judgments were sought in matters of great importance. It is this very reputation for wisdom that makes him the perfect protagonist for a tale about gaining divine knowledge. The story opens with Cormac walking upon the ramparts of Tara at dawn, keeping watch over his kingdom as a good king should. As the first light of day spreads across the plain, he notices a figure approaching from the distance. As the stranger draws nearer, Cormac sees that he is a warrior of striking appearance, wearing garments of unusual quality and color. But what captures the king's attention most of all is what the warrior carries in his hand. A branch from which hang not 3, as in Bran's tale, but 9 golden apples. The stranger approaches, and when Cormac greets him, he learns that this warrior comes from a land where there is no old age, no sickness, no death, no decay, and no falsehood. It is a place where sadness never visits and where abundance flows without effort. Cormac, intrigued, asks about the branch the stranger carries. The warrior demonstrates its power, shaking the branch so that the 9 golden apples strike against one another. The sound they produce is music of such supernatural sweetness that any who hear it immediately forget their troubles. The wounded forget their pain, the grieving forget their sorrow, and all are lulled into a peaceful state where worldly concerns simply melt away. Cormac, who has known the burdens of kingship and the weight of responsibility that comes with ruling a kingdom, is enchanted by this branch. He recognizes immediately what a gift it would be to possess such an item, how he could use it to bring comfort to his people in times of distress. He asks the stranger if he might have the branch. The warrior agrees, but names a steep price. He will give Cormac the branch in exchange for 3 wishes, to be granted at a later time. Cormac, perhaps too quickly, agrees to this bargain. The stranger hands over the branch and departs. A year passes, and Cormac uses the branch to good effect, bringing peace and comfort to his household and court. Then the stranger returns to claim his first wish. He asks for Airt, Cormac's daughter. Though this request pierces the king's heart, he has given his word, and a king's word must be kept. He surrenders his daughter to the stranger. The people of Tara are devastated by this loss, and their cries of grief fill the halls. But Cormac shakes the silver branch, and the sweet music immediately soothes their sorrow. They forget their grief and return to their normal lives. A month later, the stranger returns again. This time he asks for Febail Lifechair, Cormac's son. Again, though it tears at his soul to do so, Cormac honors his agreement. His son departs with the stranger, and again the branch's music soothes the mourning of the household. When the stranger returns a 3rd time, Cormac knows what he will ask before the words are spoken. Sure enough, the warrior demands Oisin, Cormac's beloved wife. This is almost more than Cormac can bear. He has given up his daughter and his son, but to lose his wife as well seems a cruelty beyond endurance. Yet Cormac is a man of his word, and so he agrees. But as Eden prepares to leave, she speaks out, saying, "This is too hard a bargain, to give us 3 for any branch in the world." Her words ring with truth, and they awaken something in Cormac. He has traded his entire family for a magical branch, and suddenly the trade seems profoundly unbalanced. When his wife departs with the stranger, the grief in Tara is so great that even the music of the silver branch cannot fully soothe it. Cormac tries to shake the branch to bring comfort, but the sorrow remains. He realizes that he has made a terrible mistake, that no treasure, however magical, is worth the loss of those he loves. Cormac resolves to pursue the stranger and recover his family. He takes up the silver branch and sets off in the direction the stranger traveled. As he journeys, a strange, magical mist descends upon him, a fog so thick and otherworldly that he loses all sense of direction. Through this mist he travels, not knowing where he goes but pressing forward nonetheless. When the mist finally clears, Cormac finds himself in a land of extraordinary beauty, a place unlike anywhere he has seen before. He has entered the Otherworld, the land of promise that the strangers spoke of at their first meeting. As he journeys through this wondrous realm, Cormac encounters several strange sights that carry symbolic meaning. He sees a great house being thatched with the feathers of foreign birds, but the workers can never complete their task. Each time they cover one side of the roof and go to fetch more feathers, the wind blows the first covering away. This image represents those who labor endlessly for material wealth without ever achieving satisfaction. He sees a man dragging immense logs to a fire, but by the time he returns with each new log, the previous one has burned to nothing. This symbolizes those who pursue fleeting pleasures, never accumulating lasting happiness. Finally, Cormac arrives at a magnificent fortress where he is welcomed by a handsome warrior and his beautiful wife. They offer him hospitality, and a pig is put on the spit for roasting. The host explains that this pig has remarkable properties. It will only cook if true stories are told for each of its quarters. The host begins, telling 3 true stories that cook 3/4 of the pig. Then he turns to Cormac and asks him to tell a story to cook the final quarter. Cormac, seeing no alternative, begins to relate his own tale of how he gave up first his daughter, then his son, and finally his wife in exchange for a silver branch. As he speaks the truth of his own foolishness and loss, the final quarter of the pig is cooked. When the meat is ready to be served, Cormac protests that he never dines except in the company of 50 people. The host smiles and sings a magical lullaby that sends Cormac into a deep sleep. When the king awakens, he finds himself surrounded by 50 warriors. And there before him, to his overwhelming joy, are Airt, Kerber, and Oisin, his entire family restored to him. The host reveals his true identity. He is Manannan mac Lugh, Lord of the Otherworld and ruler of Emain Ablach. The warrior who first appeared at Tara, the stranger who took Cormac's family, was Manannan in disguise. The god explains that he lured Cormac to the Otherworld for a purpose. He wished to test the king's character and, finding him worthy, to bestow upon him gifts that would aid in his rule. Manannan returns to Cormac not only his family, but also 2 magical items of great value. The first is the silver branch, which Cormac may keep for his lifetime. Its music will continue to bring peace and comfort to all who hear it. The second gift is even more remarkable, a golden cup that has the property of breaking into 3 pieces if 3 lies are spoken over it and reassembling if 3 truths are spoken. This cup of truth will allow Cormac to distinguish falsehood from truth, making him an even wiser and more just ruler than before. However, Manannan warns Cormac that these treasures may only remain with him during his own lifetime. Upon his death, they will vanish from Ireland, returning to the Otherworld from which they came. The next morning, Cormac awakens to find himself back at Tara with his family beside him and the magical gifts in his possession. He uses the cup of truth throughout his reign to ensure justice in his judgments, and the silver branch brings comfort to his people in times of sorrow. True to Manannan's word, upon Cormac's death, both treasures disappeared and were never seen in Ireland again. This tale offers a different perspective on the journey to Emain Ablach. Unlike Bran, who chose to remain in the otherworld and could not return to his former life, Cormac is permitted to experience the land of promise and then return to Ireland with gifts that enhance his ability to serve his people. His journey tests not his courage in facing physical dangers, but his integrity in honoring his word and his wisdom in recognizing his own mistakes. The story also reveals more about the nature of Emain Ablach and its lord. Manannan appears not as a distant or aloof deity, but as a trickster figure who uses deception to achieve beneficial ends. His seeming cruelty in taking Cormac's family is ultimately revealed as a teaching tool, a way of showing the king the relative value of material treasures versus the bonds of love and family. Furthermore, the tale demonstrates that the gifts of the otherworld, when properly earned and wisely used, can benefit the mortal world. The cup of truth and the silver branch serve not just Cormac, but all of Ireland during his reign, bringing justice and comfort to countless people. In this way, the boundary between Emain Ablach and the mortal world becomes permeable in both directions, with blessings flowing from the divine realm to enhance human existence. Connla and the Eternal Apple. The tales of Emain Ablach present us with heroes who actively seek the otherworld, but sometimes the otherworld itself reaches out to claim those it desires. Such is the case in the story of Connla, son of Conn of the 100 Battles, whose encounter with a fairy woman and her magical apple would lead to his disappearance from the mortal world forever. This tale, known as Airt Connla or the Adventure of Connla, dates to at least the 8th century and presents one of the most poignant depictions of the call of the otherworld and the impossibility of resisting its allure once one has been touched by it. The story opens on the hill of Oisin, considered the sacred centre of Ireland, where Conn and his son Connla stand together surveying the land. Connla is described as fair of face and ruddy of complexion, a young man in the prime of his life with all the promise of his father's glory before him. He is Conn's heir, destined to become High King himself, and his future in the mortal world seems assured and bright. As they stand there, Connla suddenly sees a woman approaching them. She is dressed in strange garments, her appearance marking her as someone from beyond the ordinary world. Connla asks her who she is and from whence she comes. The woman's reply reveals her nature immediately. She comes, she says, from the land of the living, a place where there is neither death nor old age, where no one breaks the law, and where every day is a feast without effort. The inhabitants of this land are the Aes, the fairy folk, and they dwell in great mounds that connect to the other world. Conn, hearing his son speak but seeing no one there, asks who Connla is addressing. This detail is crucial. Only Connla can see the woman. She is invisible to his father and all others present, indicating that she has appeared specifically for Connla, that he alone has been chosen or perhaps cursed to perceive her. The woman then speaks directly to Conn, explaining her purpose. She has come to invite Connla to the Plain of Delights, which is ruled by a king named Bodag. There, she promises, Connla would live forever among beautiful people, knowing neither death nor defeat. Conn is terrified. He recognizes what is happening. A woman of the side has come to take his son away to the other world. If Connla goes with her, he will never be seen in Ireland again. Desperate to save his heir, Conn calls for his druid, Cormac, begging him to use his magic against this invisible threat. Cormac, trained in the arts of counteracting supernatural influence, chants a spell against the woman. His druidic power is strong enough to banish her, at least temporarily. She can no longer be heard or perceived in any way. But as she departs, the woman throws something to Connla, an apple. This is not an ordinary piece of fruit, but a product of the Otherworld, carrying within it magical properties that will seal Connla's fate. For the next month, Connla eats only from this apple. He refuses all other food and drink, sustaining himself entirely on the fruit the fairy woman gave him. And here is the marvel: no matter how much he eats from the apple, it never diminishes. It remains whole and complete, a perfect apple that replenishes itself as quickly as he consumes it. This magical property demonstrates the nature of Otherworld abundance. Unlike the fruit of the mortal world, which is consumed and gone, the apple from the land of the living represents the infinite, inexhaustible plenty that characterizes the fairy realm. It is a concrete manifestation of the promise the woman made. In her land, feasting continues without effort or end. But the apple does more than merely sustain Connla physically. As he eats it, day after day, his desire to see the woman again grows overwhelming. The fruit creates within him a longing that nothing else can satisfy, a yearning for the country from which the apple came that makes all the pleasures and promises of the mortal world seem pale and insufficient. This is the trap, if trap it can be called, of the Otherworld. Once one has tasted its fruits, once one has had even the smallest contact with its magic, the mortal world loses its appeal. The apple is simultaneously a gift and a binding, a blessing and an inescapable call. After a month passes, the fairy woman returns. This time she appears on the plain of Arcomin, where Connla and Con are present. She immediately begins speaking to Connla, and Con again calls for his druid to banish her with magic. But the woman anticipates this response. Before Coran can work his spell, she speaks out against Druidry itself, prophesying its downfall. She declares that the power of the Druids is hated among her people and will soon be replaced by a new law, one that will come with many followers. Many scholars interpret this as a Christian interpolation in the tale, with the woman prophesying the coming of Christianity to Ireland, which would indeed replace Druidic practice. Whether this interpretation is correct or the passage represents an older tradition, the effect is clear. The woman's words rob the druid of his power. His magic cannot silence her now. Con, seeing that magical protection has failed, tries a different approach. He speaks directly to his son, noting that Connla has been silent, responding to no one but the fairy woman. He asks if her words have taken such hold of him. Connla's response breaks his father's heart. He admits that he is torn between his love for his people and his longing for the woman and her land. He has eaten of the apple, he has tasted the infinite abundance of the Otherworld, and now nothing in Ireland can satisfy his longing. The woman speaks again, sensing that Connla is on the verge of making his choice. She reminds him that if he comes with her, he can retain his youth and beauty forever, never aging, never declining into old age and death. In her land, there are only women and maidens, and perpetual pleasure awaits him. It is too much for Connla to resist. Without another word to his father, he leaps into the crystal boat that has appeared, a vessel that gleams transparent as glass, waiting to carry him across the sea. The woman takes her place beside him, and together they sail away across the waters. Those left behind watch until the boat disappears from view, becoming smaller and smaller until it finally vanishes beyond the horizon. Connla has departed from Ireland forever, and though he lives on somewhere in the Otherworld, to those who knew him in the mortal world, he is as good as dead. The aftermath of this departure is significant. Con had two sons, Connla and Airt. With Connla gone, Airt becomes his father's only heir, and he is given a new epithet, Airt the Solitary, or Airt the Lone One. This name serves as a constant reminder of the brother he lost to the fairy woman's call, a memorial to Connla that would echo through Irish history. Airt would go on to father Cormac mac Airt, the very king who would later journey to the land of promise and receive the gifts of Manannan. So even in departing, Connla's story connects to the larger mythological cycle surrounding Emain Ablach and the interaction between the mortal and divine realms. The tale of Connla presents a different perspective on the other world than the stories of Bran or Cormac. For Connla, there is no noble quest, no test of character, no eventual return with gifts for his people. Instead, there is only the irresistible pull of a realm that, once touched, cannot be forgotten or refused. The apple serves as the central symbol of this inevitability. By eating it, Connla has taken the otherworld into himself. It has become part of his physical being, and with it, the longing for the source of that fruit has become inextricable from his very nature. He cannot help but follow the woman because the apple has fundamentally changed him, aligning his desires with the otherworld rather than with mortal existence. This tale warns of the dangers of contact with the fairy realm, while simultaneously acknowledging its irresistible beauty. The otherworld is not evil in this story. The woman makes no false promises and attempts no deception. Everything she says is true. In her land, there is no death, no aging, only endless pleasure. Yet to accept her invitation means leaving behind everyone and everything one has known, severing all ties to the mortal world forever. For Connla, the choice was ultimately no choice at all. Once he had tasted that apple, his fate was sealed. He would follow the call of Emain Ablach and its sisters' realms as surely as water flows downhill, as inevitably as the tide responds to the moon. And somewhere, perhaps, he lives there still, eternally young, eternally beautiful, eternally lost to those who loved him in Ireland. Lugh Lamfada, champion of the Apple Isle. While many mortal heroes visited Emain Ablach, or were called there by its enchantments, one of the most significant figures associated with the Apple Isle was himself divine. Lugh Lamfada, whose epithet means of the long arm, was fostered and raised on Emain Ablach by Manannan mac Lir himself, making the island not just a paradise of pleasure but a training ground where one of the mightiest gods of the Tuatha De Danann would develop his legendary skills. The story of Lugh's birth is marked by tragedy and prophecy. His father, Cian, was a member of the Tuatha De Danann, while his mother, Ethniu, was the daughter of Febail of the Evil Eye, leader of the Fomorians. The Fomorians were the ancient enemies of the Tuatha De Danann, beings associated with chaos, darkness, and the more destructive aspects of nature. A prophecy had warned Febail that he would be slain by his own grandson, so when Ethniu gave birth to 3 boys, Febail ordered that they be drowned. According to various tellings of the tale, either the Druidis Byrog or Manannan mac Lir himself rescued one of the infants from the sea. This child was Lugh, and he was brought to Emain Ablach to be raised far from his murderous grandfather's reach. On the Apple Isle, young Lugh found the perfect environment for developing his extraordinary abilities. Manannan, master of magic and possessor of countless magical items, became his foster father and teacher. In Celtic society, the relationship between foster father and foster son was considered as sacred as blood kinship, sometimes even more so. By raising Lugh, Manannan was not just protecting the child but claiming him as his own, investing in him all the wisdom and knowledge he possessed. Under Manannan's tutelage, Lugh learned an astonishing array of skills. He became proficient in smithcraft, learning to work metal with supernatural skill. He mastered the art of war, becoming a warrior whose prowess would be unmatched. He learned to play the harp with such skill that he could produce the 3 strains of music that all great harpers must master: the strain of sorrow that brings listeners to tears, the strain of joy that makes them laugh, and the strain of sleep that sends them into peaceful slumber. But this was only the beginning. Lugh also learned poetry, history, sorcery, healing, and every other art and craft known to the divine beings of Ireland. He became, in essence, a master of all skills, earning him the epithet Sir Mildenach, meaning equally skilled in many arts or master of all crafts. The environment of Emain Ablach itself must have contributed to this remarkable education. On an island where abundance never fails and time flows differently than in the mortal world, Lugh had all the time he needed to perfect each skill without the pressures and limitations of ordinary existence. He could practice his swordplay for what would seem like years in the otherworld while only days passed elsewhere. He could study the secrets of magic under Manannan's guidance without the distractions of hunger, fatigue, or the concerns that plague mortal students. Moreover, Manannan equipped his foster son with magical items that would serve him well in his future battles. The sea god gave Lugh the sword Fragarak, the answerer, whose edge no armor could withstand and whose point compelled truth from anyone it threatened. He gave him a magical spear from the city of Gorias, one of the 4 treasures brought to Ireland by the Tuatha De Danann, which was so fierce in battle that it had to be kept submerged in water lest its fiery energy burn everything around it. He also provided Lugh with his own horse, capable of traveling over land and sea with equal ease, an armor that made him nearly invincible in combat. These were not merely gifts given at parting. They were tools of his education, items that Lugh trained with throughout his time on the Apple Isle until they became extensions of his own being. When Lugh finally left Emain Ablach to travel to Tara and join his father's people, he brought with him all that he had learned and all that he had been given. His arrival at the court of King Nuada is one of the famous scenes in Irish mythology. The doorkeeper at Tara was tasked with ensuring that only those with useful skills could enter to serve the king. When Lugh arrived, the doorkeeper asked what skill he possessed. Lugh replied that he was a wright, skilled in building and carpentry. But the Tuatha De Danann already had a wright, he was told. Lugh then offered himself as a smith. They had a smith. A champion. They had one. A harper, a poet, a sorcerer, a cupbearer, a brazier, a physician, a historian. To each offering, the answer came back that they already had someone filling that role. Finally, Lugh asked if they had anyone who possessed all these skills together. The doorkeeper admitted they did not. Lugh entered Tara and immediately proved his worth, defeating their champion Ogma in a contest of strength by throwing a flagstone farther than any had before, then entertaining the entire court with his harp playing. King Nuada recognized that this remarkable young man could be the key to defeating the Fomorian threat that had long oppressed the Tuatha De Danann. He gave Lugh command of their forces, and Lugh began preparing for the great conflict that would become known as the Second Battle of Marf Tuared. In this battle, all of Lugh's skills would be tested. Before the conflict began, he went among his warriors, asking each what art or skill they would bring to the fight. He collected their strengths, organized their abilities, and wove them into a coherent strategy. And during the battle itself, he employed magic, moving around the battlefield performing the crane stance, a magical posture where he stood on one foot, closed one eye, and chanted spells of blessing and cursing. The climax came when Lugh faced his grandfather, Febail of the Evil Eye. Febail's eye was so massive and so poisonous that when opened, its gaze could kill entire armies. But Lugh, with his long arm and the skills honed on Emain Ablach, used his sling to send a stone through Febail's eye just as it was being opened, driving the eye out through the back of his head and killing him instantly, thus fulfilling the ancient prophecy. With Febail's death, the Fomorian threat was broken forever. Lugh's victory owed everything to the years he had spent on the Apple Isle, training under Manannan's guidance, developing skills and powers that no other being possessed in such combination. Following the battle, Lugh became king of the Tuatha De Danann, ruling for 40 years in a time of peace and prosperity. He instituted the festival of Lunasad, held at the beginning of August, which celebrated the first harvest of the year and honored his foster mother Tailtiu, who had also played a role in his upbringing. This festival, which carries his name still, connects him to the agricultural cycle and to the abundance that he had known on Emain Ablach. The story of Lugh's time on the Apple Isle thus transforms our understanding of that mystical realm. It is not only a paradise of pleasure and escape from mortality, but also a place of education and preparation. Emain Ablach is where divine beings are shaped, where their potential is developed, where they receive the tools and knowledge they will need to fulfill their destinies. In this light, Manannan's role as foster father takes on even greater significance. He is not merely the lord of a pleasure island, but a teacher of gods, a shaper of destiny. The abundance of Emain Ablach is not just physical plenty but wealth of knowledge and skill, the riches of wisdom accumulated over timeless ages and passed down to those worthy of receiving it. Emain Ablach and the many other worlds. As we delve deeper into the mythology surrounding Emain Ablach, we encounter a complexity that speaks to the richness of Celtic spiritual understanding. The Apple Isle does not exist in isolation, but is part of a constellation of otherworld realms, each with its own characteristics yet all sharing certain fundamental qualities. Understanding how these realms relate to one another enriches our appreciation of Emain Ablach itself. The ancient Irish imagined their otherworld not as a single, unified place, but as a collection of realms, each accessible through different means and offering different experiences. These realms went by many names: Tír na nÓg, the land of the young; Tír Tangaya, the land of promise; Mag Mel, the plain of delight; Tír na Mbio, the land of the living; Tír Inar Mban, the land of women; and of course, Emain Ablach, the Isle of Apple Trees. Scholars have long debated whether these names refer to the same place described differently or to distinct though related realms. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. The various names seem to emphasize different aspects of the same essential reality, another world where the laws of mortality do not apply, where abundance flows freely, and where divine beings dwell. Emain Ablach specifically emphasizes the apple aspect, the connection to immortality and wisdom that the sacred fruit represents. Tír na nÓg emphasizes eternal youth, the freedom from aging that characterizes all these realms. Mag Mel emphasizes pleasure and delight, the joy that permeates every aspect of otherworld existence. Tír na Mban emphasizes the feminine aspect, the beautiful women who often serve as guides and inhabitants of these paradises. What makes these realms genuinely Celtic, as opposed to mere copies of Greek or other Mediterranean paradise myths, is their relationship to the visible world. Unlike the Greek Elysian Fields or the Norse Valhalla, the Celtic Otherworld was not exclusively a realm of the dead. Living mortals could visit it, either by invitation from its inhabitants or through their own questing. Moreover, the Otherworld was not located in some distant, unreachable place, but was understood to exist alongside the ordinary world, separated from it only by perception. The story of Oisin and Niamh beautifully illustrates the relationship between Emain Ablach and Tír na nÓg while demonstrating the tragedy that can result from attempting to move between worlds. Oisin, son of Fionn McCool and a member of the legendary band of warriors known as the Fianna, encounters the beautiful Niamh of the golden hair, who is the daughter of Manannan mac Lir, lord of Emain Ablach. Niamh arrives riding a magnificent white horse across the water, her golden hair streaming behind her, her beauty so radiant that all the Fianna are struck speechless. She announces that she has heard of the great warrior and poet Oisin, and has come to take him to Tír na nÓg, the land of eternal youth, where her father rules. The way the tale names Niamh as Manannan's daughter directly connects Tír na nÓg to Emain Ablach. It suggests that these are either the same realm or so closely related as to be practically identical. The land of eternal youth is, in effect, the Apple Isle by another name, emphasizing youth rather than apples but describing the same essential paradise. Oisin, captivated by Niamh's beauty and enchanted by her promises of eternal youth and joy, agrees to accompany her. He mounts behind her on the white horse, Mbar, and together they ride across the surface of the ocean toward the west. As they journey, the sea beneath them becomes a flowering plain, just as Manannan had described to Bran in that earlier tale. The horse's hooves barely touch the wave crests, which to otherworldly perception are meadows of grass. They arrive in Tír na nÓg, and everything Niamh promised proves true. The land is one of perpetual joy, where no one ages or grows ill. Oisin and Niamh marry, and he becomes a king in this paradise. They have children together, including his famous son Oscar and a daughter called Plornumon, meaning flower of women. Time passes differently in Tír na nÓg, as it does in all otherworld realms. What seems to Oisin like 3 years is actually 300 years passing in Ireland. During this time, his father Fionn dies, the Fianna disband, and the entire world he knew vanishes into legend and memory. Despite the perfection of his life in Tír na nÓg, Oisin eventually grows homesick. He longs to see Ireland again, to visit the places where he hunted with his father and his companions. Niamh is reluctant to let him go, sensing the danger, but she loves him and cannot deny his request. She provides him with her magical white horse, which can carry him back to Ireland. But she gives him a crucial warning: he must not dismount from the horse. If his feet touch Irish soil, the magic protecting him will break, and the 300 years he has escaped will catch up with him instantly. Oisin promises to be careful and sets off across the sea. When he arrives in Ireland, he finds a world transformed beyond recognition. The places he knew are overgrown or gone entirely. The people he encounters are smaller and weaker than the Fianna he remembers, and none have heard of Fionn McCool except in ancient stories. The age of heroes has passed, replaced by a new Ireland where Christianity is spreading and the old ways are fading. Lost and disoriented, Oisin tries to return to Tír na nÓg but becomes confused about the way. Then he comes upon a group of men struggling to move a large boulder from their field. The men he knew, the great warriors of the Fianna, could have lifted such a stone easily. These ordinary farmers struggle and strain without success. Remembering his great strength, Oisin reaches down from his horse to help them lift the stone. But as he leans down, the girth strap of his saddle breaks. He falls from the horse and his feet touch the ground. The moment of contact is cataclysmic. In an instant, all the years he escaped come rushing upon him. His black hair turns white, his skin wrinkles and shrinks, his muscles wither. The magnificent warrior becomes a blind, withered old man, ancient beyond imagining. The white horse, seeing what has happened, gallops away back toward the sea, returning to Tír na nÓg and Niamh. Oisin is left alone in a world he no longer recognizes, separated forever from his wife and children in the otherworld, too old to return there now. According to legend, Oisin was found by Saint Patrick, who was traveling through Ireland spreading Christianity. Patrick cared for the ancient warrior in his final days, and Oisin told him all the stories of Fionn and the Fianna, preserving for posterity the legends of the old heroes. Their conversations, recorded in the medieval text Acalum na Senarach, or Tales of the Elders, represent the meeting of two worlds, the pagan past of heroes and gods, and the Christian present of saints and salvation. The story of Oisin reinforces the same themes we have seen in other tales of Emain Ablach. Contact with the other world changes mortals fundamentally. Once one has tasted its fruits, whether literal apples or the metaphorical fruits of eternal youth and joy, return to ordinary existence becomes impossible. Oisin could visit Ireland, but he could never truly come home. The moment he touched the soil, the spell was broken and reality reasserted itself with devastating consequences. Yet there is something deeply moving about Oisin's choice to risk everything just to see his homeland once more. Despite the paradise he lived in, despite his beautiful wife and his children, despite eternal youth and endless joy, he still longed for the mortal world where his father lay buried and where his memories had been formed. This tension between transcendence and earthly attachment lies at the heart of these myths. The Apple Isle and Arthurian Avalon. One of the most fascinating aspects of Emain Ablach's legacy is its probable influence on one of the most famous mythical locations in all of Western literature, Avalon, the Isle of Apples from Arthurian legend. The connections between these two island paradises are too numerous and too specific to be coincidental, suggesting that the Irish myths of Emain Ablach directly shaped the development of the Arthurian tradition. The first major appearance of Avalon in literature comes from Geoffrey of Monmouth, a 12th century British cleric whose Historia Regum Britanniae, or History of the Kings of Britain, written around 1136, provided the foundation for much of what we now consider Arthurian legend. In this work, Geoffrey describes Avalon as Insula Avalonis, the Isle of Avalon, where King Arthur was taken after his final battle at Connla so that his wounds might be healed. In his later work, Vita Merlini, or Life of Merlin, written around 1150, Geoffrey provides more details about Avalon, calling it Insula Pomorum, meaning Isle of Fruit Trees, and specifically naming it after apples. He describes it as a fortunate isle ruled by the enchantress Morgan, later known as Morgan Le Fay, along with her 8 sisters, all skilled in healing arts. These 9 women possessed the ability to cure any wound, and it was to them that Arthur was brought after his mortal wounding. The linguistic connection to Emain Ablach is immediately apparent. The name Avalon derives from the Welsh word afal meaning apple, just as Ablach derives from the Old Irish abal meaning apple. Both names translate to essentially the same thing, the Apple Island or the Island of Apples. This is not merely a linguistic coincidence but reflects a deeper cultural connection. The Welsh word afalach was used in Welsh translations of Arthurian material to replace the Latin Avalon, creating a direct bridge between the two traditions. Moreover, Emain Ablach was known in Old Irish as a poetic name for the Isle of Man, which lies between Ireland, Britain, and Wales, making it a potential geographical link between the Irish and British mythologies. Beyond the name, the characteristics of the two islands are strikingly similar. Both are paradises located in the Western Sea, reached only through supernatural means. Both are associated with healing powers and the possibility of escaping death. Both are ruled by magical figures connected to the sea. Just as Emain Ablach is Manannan's domain, Avalon is connected to water deities and supernatural women who can traverse the boundary between mortality and immortality. The theme of healing is particularly significant. In the Irish traditions, Emain Ablach and its related realms are places where sickness cannot exist, where wounds heal naturally, and where death holds no power. Arthur's journey to Avalon is explicitly for the purpose of healing his otherwise fatal wounds, suggesting that this island possesses the same life-restoring properties as its Irish counterpart. The sisterhood of 9 women who rule Geoffrey's Avalon also echoes Celtic tradition. The number 9 was sacred to the Celts, representing completeness and wisdom. Groups of 9 women appearing in supernatural contexts occur throughout Celtic mythology, suggesting priestess traditions or goddess figures associated with wisdom and magic. In Irish tradition, 9 is often associated with poetry and the other world, making the 9 sisters of Avalon a clear reflection of Celtic religious imagery. Morgan Le Fay herself presents interesting parallels to Irish mythological figures. As chief among the 9 sisters and ruler of the Healing Isle, she resembles the powerful goddess figures of Irish tradition. Her association with the sea, with magic, and with the mysterious island paradise connects her to the same mythological framework that produced Emain Ablach. Some scholars have noted that Morgan's character may have developed from the Irish goddess Morrigan, whose name shares etymological connections. While the Morrigan is primarily a war goddess, associated with battle and death, she is also a shapeshifter and a figure of feminine power, qualities that Morgan Le Fay displays in various Arthurian texts. The motif of the hero being taken to the otherworld island after death or near death also appears in Irish tales. Just as Arthur is carried to Avalon, Irish heroes are often taken to Emain Ablach or its equivalents at crucial moments, either dying to this world while living on in the next, or being healed and returned to face their destinies. Importantly, just as Arthur is often described as not truly dead but sleeping in Avalon, waiting to return when Britain needs him most, similar motifs appear in Irish tradition. Heroes who have gone to Emain Ablach are often described as still living there, not dead but removed from the mortal world, potentially able to return if circumstances require. This concept of the once and future king, so central to Arthurian legend, may itself derive from Irish ideas about the relationship between the otherworld and mortal existence. In Celtic understanding, death was not an ending but a transformation, and those in the otherworld continued to exist and could potentially interact with the living. Arthur sleeping in Avalon is essentially an otherworld journey, his soul residing in a paradise where time moves differently, from which he might one day return. The influence likely flowed through several channels. Geoffrey of Monmouth, writing in Wales and familiar with both Welsh and possibly Irish traditions, had access to stories about magical Western islands. The Norman French writers who expanded upon his work may have encountered Irish tales through the cultural exchanges happening between Ireland, Britain, and France during the medieval period. The apple as a symbol of immortality and wisdom was known throughout Celtic cultures, making it natural for different but related traditions to develop similar island paradise myths. The Arthurian tradition, spreading throughout Europe and eventually around the world, carried within it the echoes of Emain Ablach. Every telling of the Arthur legend, every depiction of Avalon, carries the DNA of those ancient Irish myths about the Apple Isle where Manannan ruled and where heroes found what they were seeking, whether that was wisdom, healing, eternal youth, or simply escape from the harsh realities of mortal existence. Understanding this connection enriches both traditions. Avalon becomes not merely a literary creation of Geoffrey's, but the latest manifestation of a belief stretching back into the mists of Celtic prehistory. And Emain Ablach's significance expands beyond Irish shores to influence one of the most important mythological complexes in Western culture, the Eternal Paradise. Having explored the various tales and connections associated with Emain Ablach, let us now turn our attention to understanding what life on this mystical island was believed to be like. What qualities defined this paradise that made heroes abandon everything to reach it and gods choose it as their dwelling place? The descriptions scattered throughout the ancient texts paint a picture of perfection that addresses every human longing and fear. At its most fundamental level, Emain Ablach is a place where death holds no dominion. No one who dwells there grows old. No disease can touch the inhabitants. The cycle of birth, aging, decline, and death that governs mortal existence simply does not apply on the Apple Isle. Consider what this would mean from the perspective of an ancient Irish person. Life in early medieval Ireland, despite its rich culture and achievements, was marked by constant uncertainties. Disease could sweep through communities without warning. Injuries that today would be easily treated could prove fatal. Childbirth was dangerous for both mother and child. Famine threatened whenever crops failed. Warfare was endemic. To imagine a place where none of these dangers existed, where the body remained permanently healthy and vital, where loved ones would never be taken by illness or age, must have seemed like the most perfect paradise imaginable. Yet Emain Ablach offered more than mere physical immortality. It was also a place of emotional and spiritual perfection. The ancient texts consistently emphasize that sorrow never visits the Apple Isle. There is no grief, no loss, no pain of heart. Since no one dies and no one declines, the mourning that accompanies loss in the mortal world has no place there. Additionally, there is no conflict on Emain Ablach. Unlike the human world, where disagreements can lead to feuds, wars, and violence, the inhabitants of the Apple Isle live in perfect harmony. There is no falsehood there, no treachery, no betrayal. Everyone speaks truth and acts with integrity because deception has no place in paradise. The physical description of Emain Ablach evokes abundance and beauty in every aspect. The apple trees themselves bear fruit continuously, their branches never bare, their bounty never exhausted. Unlike earthly orchards that produce only seasonally and must be tended with labor, the trees of Emain Ablach require no cultivation. They simply produce endlessly and effortlessly, an apt metaphor for the divine abundance that flows from the source of all creation. Beyond the apple trees, the landscape includes flowering plains that stretch as far as the eye can see. These meadows are not subject to seasonal change. They do not wither in autumn or lie dormant in winter. Instead, they remain perpetually in the fullness of spring or summer, flowers blooming in impossible varieties and colors, their fragrance filling the air with sweetness. Music pervades the island. Not the music of human instruments, which must be played and which eventually stops, but the music of the divine realm itself. The apple branches with their golden fruit produce melodies when the wind stirs them. The birds sing in harmonies unknown in the mortal world. The very air seems to hum with a background tone that soothes and uplifts all who hear it. The inhabitants of Emain Ablach spend their time in what might be called productive leisure. They feast constantly, but unlike mortal feasting, which requires killing animals, preparing food, and eventually dealing with the aftermath, otherworld feasting is magical. The food appears ready to eat and never runs out. The pigs that Manannan provides regenerate each day, their bones only needing to be placed in the sty for the animals to reform, alive and whole. Mead flows from cups that never empty. Plates remain full no matter how much is eaten from them. Between feasts, the inhabitants engage in activities that bring joy without effort. They ride magnificent horses across the flowering plains. They compete in games and contests where skill is displayed but losing carries no shame. They compose poetry and music of supernatural beauty. They share stories and engage in conversations that span the entire history of the cosmos. Sexual love is presented as pure and joyful on Emain Ablach, free from the complications and sorrows that attend mortal relationships. The women of the island are described as supernaturally beautiful, their love freely given to those they choose. There is no jealousy, no rejection, no heartbreak. These relationships exist in a state of perpetual honeymoon, with none of the challenges that test earthly couples. Time itself operates differently on the Apple Isle, though the exact nature of this difference varies between tales. Sometimes, time seems to stop entirely, with inhabitants experiencing moments that stretch into eternity. Other times, time moves very slowly relative to the mortal world, so that centuries pass on Earth while only years pass in paradise. In either case, the urgency that drives mortal existence, the awareness of limited time and approaching death, simply does not exist. This treatment of time deserves particular consideration because it addresses one of the deepest human anxieties. We mortals are bound by time, aware from an early age that our days are numbered. This awareness colors everything we do, creating both urgency and despair. To exist outside of time, or in time that moves so slowly as to be essentially timeless, would be to escape this fundamental source of human suffering. Yet the texts also hint that something vital may be lost in this timelessness. When Bran returns to Ireland after what seemed a short stay in the land of women, he discovers that centuries have passed and everyone he knew is dead. When Oisin touches Irish soil, the 300 years he escaped come crashing upon him. These moments suggest that while otherworld time may be pleasurable to experience, it comes at the cost of connection to the mortal world and those who dwell there. The social structure of Emain Ablach appears egalitarian, or at least without the strict hierarchies of mortal societies. While Manannan is clearly the lord of the isle, he rules not through force or domination but through wisdom and generosity. The inhabitants seem to live in perfect cooperation, their needs all met, their relationships all harmonious. This may be the most utopian aspect of the Emain Ablach myth. Ancient Irish society, like all human societies, was marked by class distinctions, power struggles, and social conflicts. Kings vied with one another for supremacy. Nobles competed for status and resources. The common people labored under the demands of those above them. To imagine a society where all these tensions had dissolved, where cooperation replaced competition and harmony replaced conflict, represented a radical vision of what existence could be. In this light, Emain Ablach becomes not merely a place to escape mortality, but a vision of perfected society, a model of what the world could be if freed from the limitations of human nature. It is paradise in the fullest sense, not just a pleasant place to reside, but a state of existence in which all things have been made right. Legacy of the Apple Isle. As we draw our journey toward its close, let us consider the enduring legacy of Emain Ablach and what this ancient myth continues to offer us in the modern world. Though thousands of years have passed since the first bards sang of the Apple Isle, its themes resonate still, speaking to aspects of human experience that remain constant across time and culture. At its core, the myth of Emain Ablach addresses the universal human longing for transcendence. We are mortal beings who can imagine immortality, limited creatures who can conceive of perfection. This creates a tension at the heart of human existence, a yearning for something more than what our brief lives can offer. The Apple Isle gives form to this yearning, providing a concrete image of what that something more might look like. For the ancient Irish, this image was shaped by their specific cultural context. Their paradise featured apple orchards because apples were sacred in their tradition. Their otherworld was located beyond the Western Sea because that was the direction of mystery and the unknown in their geography. Their divine beings were the Tuatha De Danann because those were the gods of their people. Yet beneath these cultural specifics lies a universal structure. Every major religion and mythological system contains its own version of Emain Ablach. The Garden of Eden, the Elysian Fields, Valhalla, the Western paradise of Pure Land Buddhism, the happy hunting grounds of various Native American traditions, each represents a culture's attempt to imagine perfect existence. That these diverse cultures, separated by vast distances of space and time, all developed paradise myths suggests something fundamental about human consciousness. We need these myths. They serve psychological functions that are essential to human well-being. They provide hope in the face of mortality, suggesting that death may not be the absolute end, but a passage to something better. They offer a vision of justice, where the suffering and injustices of this world will be balanced by perfect happiness in the next. They give meaning to moral behavior by suggesting that how we live matters beyond our individual lifespans. For modern readers, the myth of Emain Ablach can be approached on multiple levels. Those who hold traditional spiritual beliefs may see in it an ancient expression of truths about the afterlife or the nature of divine reality. For them, Emain Ablach may represent a genuine otherworld that exists beyond physical death, accessible to souls that have earned entry through virtue or been called there by divine grace. Others may interpret the myth psychologically, seeing in Emain Ablach a symbol of states of consciousness rather than literal places. In this reading, the Apple Isle represents peak experiences, moments when we feel ourselves connected to something larger than our individual egos, when time seems to stop and we feel fully alive in the present moment. Artists describe such states when creativity flows freely. Athletes speak of being in the zone, where everything clicks perfectly. Meditators report transcendent experiences where ordinary awareness dissolves into something oceanic and timeless. Still others might approach the myth ecologically, seeing in Emain Ablach a memory of humanity's relationship with nature before agricultural civilization disrupted that connection. The abundant orchards that require no tending, the harmonious relationship between inhabitants and environment, the cycles of death and rebirth represented by Manannan's regenerating pigs, all speak to a vision of human existence in balance with the natural world. From a literary perspective, Emain Ablach's influence extends far beyond Irish shores. We have already traced its connection to Arthurian Avalon, but the Apple Isle's influence may reach even further. The Garden of the Hesperides in Greek mythology, with its golden apples guarded by dragon and nymphs, bears remarkable similarities to Celtic apple paradise myths. Whether these represent independent developments or cultural exchange along ancient trading routes remains debated among scholars. In more recent literature, echoes of Emain Ablach appear in works from Tennyson's Idylls of the King to Marion Zimmer Bradley's The Mists of Avalon, to countless fantasy novels that feature blessed isles and magical realms. Tolkien's Valinor, the undying lands across the sea to which the elves sail, owes clear debts to Celtic Otherworld traditions. C.S. Lewis's descriptions of Narnia's paradise, the country between worlds, reflect similar ideas. Even our secular culture carries traces of this myth. The apple as a symbol of knowledge, of temptation, of paradise itself, permeates Western consciousness. Snow White is poisoned by an apple and enters a death-like sleep from which only magic can wake her. William Tell must shoot an apple from his son's head, risking all on a single shot. The Apple Computer Company chose its logo deliberately, invoking associations with knowledge and innovation. For those who engage in contemporary Celtic spirituality or druidic practice, Emain Ablach remains a living part of their tradition. Modern druids may meditate upon the Apple Isle as a sacred landscape, using its imagery to connect with ancestral wisdom and divine energies. Rituals involving apple symbolism, silver branch ceremonies, and visualizations of the otherworld draw directly upon these ancient myths, keeping them alive not as museum pieces, but as vital spiritual practice. The festivals connected to these myths also persist. Lunasad, the festival honoring Lugh who was raised on Emain Ablach, is still celebrated at the beginning of August. This harvest festival, marking the first cutting of grain and the ripening of early fruits including apples, connects us directly to the mythological cycles we have explored. When modern celebrants gather to honor the harvest, they participate in a tradition stretching back thousands of years to when these gods and their stories were at the center of religious life. Perhaps most importantly, the myth of Emain Ablach reminds us of the power of imagination to transcend circumstance. The ancient Irish, living in conditions of hardship that would seem intolerable to modern people, imagined a world of perfect abundance and joy. Rather than being crushed by the difficulties of their existence, they created stories that elevated their vision beyond immediate circumstances to contemplate the possibility of something better. This is the lasting gift of Emain Ablach, not as literal belief in an island paradise, but as testament to the human capacity to dream of better worlds and, in so dreaming, to bring aspects of those worlds into present existence. The paradise we imagine shapes the reality we create. When we envision abundance, we become more generous. When we imagine harmony, we create more peace. When we contemplate immortality, we focus on what truly matters rather than getting lost in trivialities. The silver branch still calls to those who have ears to hear it. Its music, filtering down through the centuries, invites us to remember that this world of limitation and loss is not the whole of existence, that somewhere beyond the boundaries of ordinary perception, the apple trees still bear their golden fruit, and the feast continues for all who have found their way to those blessed shores. My dear friends, we have journeyed far together this evening, crossing the silver sea to explore the enchanted shores of Emain Ablach. We have met the mighty Manannan mac Lir, lord of that blessed isle, and marveled at his magical possessions. We have followed brave heroes like Bran mac Febail as they ventured into the unknown, seeking the paradise that a mysterious woman's song described. We have witnessed Cormac mac Airt tested and rewarded, Connla lost forever to the fairy woman's call, and Lugh trained in all arts upon the Apple Isle's eternal shores. We have traced the connections between this Irish paradise and its echoes in other traditions, seeing how Emain Ablach shaped the development of Arthurian Avalon and continues to influence our storytelling even today. We have contemplated what life on the Apple Isle would mean: freedom from death and disease, abundance without toil, harmony without conflict, beauty without end. Yet even as we marvel at this vision of perfection, we have seen the shadow that accompanies it. Those who taste of the otherworld's fruits can never fully return to mortal life. Bran sails away forever, Connla disappears into the west, Oisin crumbles to dust when he touches Irish soil. The paradise of Emain Ablach comes with a price. The severing of earthly ties, the loss of connection to the flowing stream of mortal time where love and memory and meaning are made. Perhaps this is the deepest wisdom the myth offers. The otherworld exists, whether a spiritual reality or psychological truth or metaphor for transcendence. It calls to us through beauty, through longing, through those moments when ordinary life seems insufficient. But we are creatures of this world as much as of the next, beings of flesh and time as well as spirit and eternity. The true hero's journey may not be to reach Emain Ablach and remain there forever, nor to reject its call entirely and remain bound to mortal limitation. Perhaps it is to hold both worlds in awareness simultaneously, to touch the timeless while remaining present to time, to taste the apple of immortality while savoring the ephemeral sweetness of mortal fruit, to hear the silver branches' music while still attending to the voices of those we love. In this way, we carry Emain Ablach within us, not as a place to escape to but as a reminder of what is possible, a vision of the sacred that infuses ordinary existence with meaning and beauty. As you settle deeper into relaxation, perhaps you can imagine the scent of apple blossoms on the evening breeze, hear faintly the music of golden fruit upon silver branches, feel the presence of that enchanted isle just beyond the horizon of ordinary awareness. Know that the wonders we have spoken of tonight are not merely old stories but living truths, available to those who approach them with open hearts and willing imaginations. Thank you for sharing this voyage with me tonight, for allowing me to guide you through the ancient stories and into the presence of the Apple Isle. If you have enjoyed our time together and wish to continue exploring the rich mythology of Ireland and the Celtic world, please do subscribe to Emerald Dreams, and share this video with others who might find peace and inspiration in these tales. Your support allows these ancient stories to continue reaching new audiences, keeping alive the wisdom our ancestors preserved through countless generations. Leave me a comment below sharing which aspect of Emain Ablach most captured your imagination. Was it the silver branch and its enchanting music? The figure of Manannan mac Lugh with his magical treasures? The poignant tragedy of heroes who could not return from paradise? I love hearing your thoughts and building this community of fellow seekers and dreamers. Until our next journey together, may the blessings of the Apple Isle rest gently upon you. May you find in your own life moments of timeless beauty, tastes of divine abundance, glimpses of that eternal peace that the ancient Irish found in Emain Ablach. May your dreams be filled with flowering plains and fruiting orchards, with music that soothes and joy that endures. Sleep well, dear friends, and remember, somewhere beyond the western waves, the apple trees still bear their golden fruit, and the feast continues for all who seek it. Good night, and blessed be your wanderings.